You took the narcissism test. Mm-hmm. You're not measurably narcissistic. You actually scored very low.
Come on. Let me take this test. So the question is, can he game the assessment? So I'll take the test twice. Once trying to score low, and then once trying to score high. Before I start, two caveats. The first is, I cannot diagnose somebody from afar. I've never met Tom Sandoval, so I am not talking about Tom Sandoval. I'm talking about somebody like him, somebody who presents the way he's been edited on his podcast and on Vanderpump Rules. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I love Dr. Drew. I grew up with Dr. Drew. I think that Dr. Drew is the plumb line for sort of what I'm trying to do with this channel. This Pop Psych channel exists so that I can use events in pop culture to talk about psychology. Dr. Drew used Loveline, used the radio as a way to explain and discuss health, sexual health, with young kids. I think he did an exceptional job. He continues to do an exceptional job. There is sort of nobody in media I admire more for his ability to walk that line of being both sort of a medical specialist and also highly relatable. Okay, I've got a lot to say here. So first, let's just talk about this test. Dr. Drew is pretty well known for having this test that measures narcissistic traits. And I want to be really clear. In this episode, Drew is really good about saying this is not a diagnostic tool. It just measures the traits of narcissism. And he has given this to a lot of celebrities and done research on it. And famously, Robin Quivers got a 34, meaning that she was the highest score he's ever seen on this particular test. So Tom Sandoval takes it and he gets a very low score. And now look, that sounds interesting. It's a great clickbait. But if you dive into the test, it is exceptionally face valid. Meaning, the questions, if you know the diagnostic criteria of narcissism, are super easy to interpret. Questions like, do you need to have power? Or do you not need to have power? Well, a narcissist probably wants power. I'll click that. So the fact that Tom scored low on that assessment is not representative of him lacking those traits. It's just representative of him not being stupid. He's trying to clear his name and change his reputation. So of course, he's going to try to game that assessment. I would have believed it much more if there were items in there that were designed to test faking good, or even designed to test malingering, some kind of validity check. But to have an exceptionally face valid test that anybody could score exactly however they want, that's silly. Now, what's interesting is in this episode, Dr. Drew says to Tom, I don't think that you're a narcissist, but I think you're codependent. And Tom's like, yes, I am codependent. I think that what Dr. Drew, in my opinion, is clocking as codependency, I think we used to call the vulnerable type of narcissism, right? There used to be grandiose narcissism and vulnerable narcissism. In the DSM-5, they've gotten rid of that and it's just one global diagnosis. But the idea is that narcissism can present differently in different people. Some people are really out and loud and they say sort of very clearly, I'm the best. Other people show a lot of insecurity and want to be taken care of because they're more important than everybody else. I do think that what we see in Tom is more that insecure type. And Drew's labeling that as codependency. But here's the thing. First of all, codependency is not a diagnosis. It's a way of moving through the world. It's a character. It's a quality. Somebody who is codependent is so deferential to other people that they're constantly wanting other people to be happy and satisfied and to view them positively. A classic example would be when a mother gives her drug-addicted son money to go buy drugs. Or on that show, My 600-Pound Life, when you have the wife of the super obese man feeding him, that's an extremely codependent behavior. You are putting yourself in a one-down position to make the other person better. I think that whenever you hear Tom talk about other people, he is sort of articulating that he's insecure, but everything he does is in service of himself. So for example, first of all, in the very beginning of the episode, Schwartz says, I have to remind Tom Sandoval to ask other people about themselves. And even Drew's like, ooh, that sounds a little bit narcissistic.
We've had lighthearted interventions about this, Tom. You make sure to ask people about themselves as well.
Well, that's a little narcissistic that you'd have to say that.
Yeah. And then, by the way, this entire episode, which is supposed to be an interview of Dr. Drew, is all about Tom. He's brought Dr. Drew on. I think Dr. Drew thinks this is going to be a back and forth interview, and it's not. And at the end of the show, Drew says to Tom, hey, have any of these aired? Because my suggestion would be that you ask the guest some questions. And then Tom goes, oh, yeah, I meant to. And then he tries to think of what he had planned to talk about with Drew. And it's like crickets. You can see him going like, I meant to talk to you about your history. And
it's a lot about you in this. And I'd like to see you pay attention to some other people and see what you're,
that's again, like, you know, I didn't even know today, like, I didn't even plan for this to be like this.
Yeah,
today.
I didn't know what we were going to do either, but here we are.
I was going to talk, about your, past and different things. And
he had nothing planned, which to me is sort of the cornerstone of what differentiates a narcissist from somebody who is selfish. Somebody who is selfish doesn't like people or care about people. They're not interested in the well-being of others. A narcissist doesn't know that person's even there. And that's what you like. Tom's not mean. He just doesn't even imagine that anybody would care what's going on with Drew. And then when he talks about his relationship with Ariana and the difficulty, the struggle he had with breaking up with her. And it's all about how he couldn't break up with her because the relationship was of financial value, because he was being served in some way. Throughout this whole thing, there's this constant demonstration of this world existed, I was unhappy, and so I needed to do things to make myself happy. It's not codependency. Codependency would be the opposite behavior. Another example is when he was talking about his childhood, like even as a middle schooler. He was an insecure kid, and then all of a sudden he got popular because he could dance. And he says, once I was popular, I would only date girls that increased my status. I was really dismissive of people that I actually liked. I was like, he's describing this young kid that is maneuvering and manipulating people in 8th grade. And he gets pushed down by it it's like the same exact thing that's happened here on Vanderpump Rules. Because of his behavior, he got pushed down, and his response was to dial it in. How do I figure out how to play this game so I can be cool? And then by high school, he's then cool again, right? So there's just so many examples of him doing things to serve himself, maneuvering the environment. And then the last thing I wanted to share, which I thought was, again, fascinating, was how he snuck into dance clubs when he was 15 years old.
Because I was a good dancer, I would like sneak into clubs and I would be like hanging out with older girls that were like already sexually experienced, and I had no experience sexually, and people would see me like, because I was such a good dancer and I could move my body, they just assumed that I was like this guru in bed, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I would get like really nervous, and I like couldn't
How old were you?
get like an erection.
Listen to the way he describes himself there. This idea that he has these incredible moves, and all of the women, all these mature women are looking at him and they think you must have this incredible sexual prowess. You just, because you're gyrating your hips on the dance floor, you must just be a guru in the sack. And then Tom felt insecure about that. That's a wild distortion of reality. He's not interviewing all of these women and saying, do you think that I'm the next Ron Jeremy? That's all on his brain. So at a very young age, he has I think, a very distorted sense of who he is and how people view him. And I think he does. I think at a very young age, he distorted that reality to make himself feel good because he wasn't operating on solid ground. Now, I want to be really clear. I want to compliment Drew here. He's doing this at, I think, 14 or 15 years old, which is young. And, Drew says that could be a traumatic experience, and it could. At a very young age, 14 years old, it's freshman in high school, for him to be so concerned about how he's interacting with women, whether or not he could get an erection, feels extreme to me. And it's early. And the question is, what's going on in his life that led him to hyper-focus on sex? So I do think that there were traumatic events in his life that could have led to this kind of distorted sense of self. I guess the whole point that I'm making here is I can't diagnose him. What I can for sure say is just because he passed Dr. Drew's traits test does not mean that he couldn't be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. So that's what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below.